Hi everyone, we are the OU group and we are currently developing CleaRing, a small device which allows you to disinfect any door handles, shopping carts and more. This is a how-to video to build yourself the DIY version. You will need the following materials: a garden hose, a needle, some packaging foam or some cork, some scissors, some hot glue or super glue if you want to, some duct tape, a kitchen sponge, a knife and a plastic bottle. We'll start by cutting the sponge in half. Now take the knife and score your sponge like so. This way the sponge will bend a lot more easily and will later enable us to clean handles of almost any shape. Pick the bottle. Using the knife, we'll be cutting it like so. Depending on the size of your sponge, you'll want to cut off a ring of equal width to the initial width of your sponge. The size of the actual bottle doesn't matter. Here I am using a 2-liter bottle, which is too large for my tiny sponges. But that's not a problem. The plastic bends quite easily, which will allow us to reshape the ring later. This will actually be the outer casing of our CleaRing, which will house the sponges we just cut. Don't worry too much about the clean edges, we'll be taking them off later with the scissors. Now that we have our ring, we'll now cut straight across it. The flexibility of the plastic eliminates the need for a joint. I am now going to mark the area where the sponge will sit. Simply place it roughly in the middle of your bottle strip and allow about a centimeter room to the edge. These will be the sponge holders. Now, take the scissors and cut out the small squares you marked on the edge and make a cut on each side to mark the length of your sponge. Instead of gluing it down, this way once the sponge gets dirty you can just take it out and wash it. We recommend doing this at least once a week at a temperature of minimum 60 degrees Celsius using soap. We will now make small incisions along the edge. The lengths of these incisions should be about the same as the 2 previous cuts we made on this side. Do this for both sides. Once you've finished, simply bend the little winglets to a vertical position. You can even overbend them a little bit, absolutely no harm in that. The thing you want to make sure is that the sponge is slightly wider than the holders. This way you assure a snug fit so the sponge won't just fall out during usage or transport. To test the fit of your sponge, simply slide it in from the top and, if needed, make the necessary adjustments. Here I am bending the ring to achieve the desired curvature. Now for the placement of the second sponge. As I mentioned before, the circumference of my bottle is a bit too large for the 2 small sponges. When deciding on the positioning of the second sponge, you want its outer edge touching the outer edge of the first sponge. Once you know your placement, just proceed as before, placing lines at the edges of the sponge, and afterwards cutting them down. This time we have additional room up top, which is why I'll be cutting it off along this edge. Now just cut along the marked edges and do the incisions as before. So now we have the 2 sponge holders. If you look at the top side, you'll notice these 2 remaining pieces. We are simply going to cut them off along this line with our scissors. Let's take care of the shape now. For easier bending, remove your sponges and roll your ring as tightly as possible, like I am doing right now. And voila, you've got your desired shape. Next, let's build the reservoir for the disinfectant. For this, you'll need the garden hose. Here I'm cutting off a piece not much longer than my ring to keep the device compact. Because this hose is pretty rigid, we'll need connectors. We'll simply make them from the remaining part of the hose. You're looking for pieces of about 2 cm in length. This way, your CleaRing will remain easily bendable. This is the type of connection we are going for. Because we are working with a round shape, we'll need to adapt these two by cropping them along this line. To attach the hose to our ring, we'll need to cut 2 holes. Place the connector pieces on the first segment of the plastic ring and draw around them. The resulting ellipses will be our cutting guide. After doing this for both sides, we'll cut out both ellipses. To prevent leakage, make sure the holes are slightly wider than the connectors to stick them inside later. Before we can put everything together, we'll need to cut holes into our disinfectant tank to carry the liquid through the connectors to the sponge. This time, just cut 2 simple circular holes with the appropriate distance. Let's assemble everything. Stick the connectors into the tank. Make sure to orient them correctly. Placing them at a slight angle will help to maintain the shape of the ring. Now, carefully seal the perimeter using hot glue. Don't burn yourself. This part is optional, but I do recommend doing it for the sake of structural integrity. After the glue has hardened, cut off about 20 centimeters of the tape. I'm using electric tape because of its stretch. I think this allows for more flexibility, but you can of course use duct tape too. Just wrap both sides like this. Alright, our tank is almost ready. Now we need to make the plugs. I'm using thick packaging foam, though any waterproof foam like Eva foam will do. If you don't have any, just use corks from wine bottles. In total, we need 2 plugs and 2 flow regulators. Just start by cutting 4 cubes from the foam. By gradually cutting off the edges and checking for size in between, you should end up with 4 perfect plugs fairly quickly. Stick one of them deep into one side of the tank. The other one should be easily removable. We'll need to open it to fill the tank. The remaining 2 will be our flow regulators. First, we need to trim them a bit. Be sure to check if they fit snugly, otherwise you'll have some leakage. Now comes the tricky part. Take your needle and pierce some holes into them. This way, the disinfectant only comes out in small droplets. And pay attention to your fingers. Alright, our flow regulators are complete and now we only need to glue them into the hose. Start by sticking them in as deep as they will go, then carefully glue around the rim. Sometimes the foam will expand from the heat of the hot glue gun. It'll almost look like the plugs are starting to come back out. Don't attempt to stick them further in, you'll only burn yourself. And yes, I am speaking from experience. Once the glue has dried, we'll begin the final assembly. Stick the connector tubes into the ring casing and then carefully glue around the rim. Here, it's absolutely crucial to hold the ring in place, as the expanding plastic will otherwise make your ring appear crooked. Once the glue has cooled, we'll seal the back of the disinfectant tank simply by gluing all around it. And as a final precaution, I'll also add some tape around the connector tubes. Again, this is completely optional. The strips are about 3 cm each. Besides, I think the blue tape adds style. Now, stick the sponges back in. Fill it up with some surface disinfectant and you're ready to go.